Number 4. So this story takes place over one summer when I was 14 years old. It was around 11 PM and I was in my bedroom on my computer. I had just gotten home. I was living with my brother at the time because my parents were in Florida for a while. So me and my brother, we were the only ones home and the only ones who had access to the house. I needed a photo of myself for something. I don't remember what, and I opened my camera roll to look through. This was the picture that I found. Immediately, my whole body froze and I couldn't move. I closed the camera roll and sat in my bed for a while. I began shaking and tears of fright came to my eyes. I gained the courage to open the camera roll to look again. I stared at the photo for at least 10 minutes, feeling more uneasy every second. I checked the time the picture was taken, and that made me even more distressed. The picture was taken at 9:45 PM, and what made it worse was that my brother and we both left the house at 8 to get dinner. No one was home at the time the picture was taken. Afraid to leave my room, I picked up my phone and messaged my brother. I told him that I was really scared and that I couldn't move and asked if he could come here. He asked me what was wrong, and I sent him the picture from my computer along with what happened. He actually thought it was a joke at first and told me good night. But me, not joking, I called him back. He could obviously hear me crying and started questioning me. I told him to come to my room and he did so. He entered my room with a golf club for protection. At this point, we were both shitting our pants, staring at the blurry picture of a man we didn't recognize. We decided that we should go check out the house to see if anyone was here. So we proceeded to swipe through all 4 floors of our house. We didn't see anything sketchy on the top 3 floors, so we walked down to the basement. We walked down the stairs and my brother led the way. "Shit," he whispered. I looked to the back corner of our basement where the cellar door that leads to the outside is. The door and the hatch thing that covers the steps to the outside are both wide open. After this happened, we called the police. They told us to lock our doors and call them if we heard or saw anything. We locked the doors and both sat in his room for the rest of the night. Whoever was in our house and on my computer must have opened the computer and opened the camera accidentally. He must have accidentally pressed the spacebar while the camera was open in the background and snapped a picture of himself. I still wonder why someone would just break into a house for nothing. Nothing was stolen, no drawers or cabinets were open. Nothing seemed to be out of place. My brother ended up moving out of the house a few days later, in fear that the guy would come back.
Number 3.
So about 9 years ago, making me 16, I was staying with some friends whilst me and my mum had a cooling off period after constant arguments and fights. We were too similar and were always clashing over the smallest of things. I actually stayed with my friend for about 2 months, as the calm atmosphere, it was good for me. Chaos and drama followed my mum all through her life and I hated it so much. I thought that I hated her for a while too. Teen angst, I guess. Towards the end of me living with my friend in a nice and relaxed atmosphere, mine and my mum's relationship started to get better. Distance makes the heart grow fonder and all of that. I texted her to say that I would pop over for a visit and see how she was and if this time apart was as happy and relaxing as it was for me. I know this doesn't seem like a normal mother-daughter relationship, but my mum was quite an intense individual and this seeped into her parenting skills. She seemed weird and off with me when she replied though, quite snappy and cold. We had stayed in touch obviously while I was away, and although her mum skills weren't great, she still liked to stay involved best she could to make sure I was doing okay, which made this text seem weird. But like I said, we did argue and clash, so I assumed she was having one of her off days. Me being me, and only 16 at the time, took offense and thought, fine, be that way. So I didn't go over and see her or reply to her cold text. I just left it. Had I just listened to my first instinct that the text was weird, things would have been very different. I was very stubborn and didn't get in touch with her for another week or so. I waited until she got in touch. I was at my friend's house doing revisions for exams when her mum came up to her room to get me. She told me that my mum was at the door, but the look on her face, it scared her. She looked very worried, and it alarmed me. I hurried downstairs to the front door to see my mum. She looked horrendous. Her usually long, beautiful hair had been hacked off to short and uneven lengths. Her eyes were swollen and black and blue. She had deep cuts all over her face and neck, and bruising just everywhere. I burst into tears. I couldn't stop shaking. It was the worst moment of my life to see her like that. My friend's mum made her come inside and sit down and was fussing over her. My mum told me that on the day I texted her to say I was coming over, 3 drug addicts had broken into her house and terrorized her for hours. They cut her hair off with a knife. They had lifted our TV up and broke it over her back as they smashed it over her. One of the addicts had held a knife to her stomach and tried to stab her, but my mum held them away with her legs, all the while wetting herself. It was absolutely heartbreaking and terrifying to listen to. I think the thing that breaks my heart the most still to this day was one of the people holding her hostage had read my message and was going to reply to try and lure me there. But my mum begged and cried and screamed so much that this guy finally gave up and sent me the message that I received that day. I have never forgiven myself for not thinking more into it and just going around to the house anyway. After the ordeal, they had trashed the house and took some things and went on their own way. My mum called the police and was taken to the hospital, where she was there for a week, and all the while I was in selfish mode thinking my mum was a dick and how I was better off without her. She said that she never wanted me to see her in hospital as she knew that it was an important time with my exams. As it was a small town that we lived in, she recognized who 2 of these people were and was able to identify them, resulting in all 3 going to prison. One of the attackers was a woman with children. The judge didn't go lightly on them due to a long list of previous convictions, which we were obviously happy about. It's not very often that the victim of such an attack is granted so much justice.
Number 2.
Bear in mind that this was late 2009 and I was only 10 at the time, and me and my mother and stepdad lived in a small town in Sweden in a really big house. One evening when I was home alone because my mum and stepdad were going to my grandma's house, and I asked them if I could stay home alone because, as a typical 10-year-old, I thought I was too grown up for a babysitter. After about an hour of nagging, she gave up and told me that I could stay home alone, only if I kept the door locked and never opened to anyone. It was really exciting for me, and I stayed up really late watching cartoons. If I remember correctly, I was watching SpongeBob in our living room and eating ice cream. After about 5 minutes of eating the delicious ice cream, I was sure that I heard a silent knock on the door. I didn't think much of it though and continued watching my show. Another 5 minutes passed and I heard the knocking again, but this time it was much louder. I was frozen in fear and waited for the knocking to stop. After about 30 seconds, the knocking stopped, and the only sound was the TV. I called my mum and she said that she'll be home in 20 minutes and she told me to go into my room and lock my door. I went into my room without turning the TV off, so it was pretty loud. I sat in my room and after about 2 minutes, I heard somebody not knocking but banging really loud at the door. I was frozen in fear once again. After about 3 minutes, I could hear the door lock turn and somebody walking in. The person was inside my house while I was home alone. I sat there in my room quiet, and then the TV, it turned off. The footsteps grew louder and it felt like it was coming towards my room. After a couple of seconds, the footsteps, they stopped and I could hear knocking on my bedroom door and an old man saying,
"Let me in, I have something for you."
I started screaming and crying for my mum. and the man started shaking the door handle. After about 2 minutes, I heard a car outside, so I looked out the window. It was my mum. I opened the window and screamed for help and said that there was a man in the house. My stepdad quickly ran to the shed to get his axe and ran up the stairs. The man quickly ran out the back door and my stepdad ran after him into the streets. My mum called the police and my stepdad calmed me down when he got in. This is an experience I will never forget.
Number 1.
In my mid-20s, I was in a small gang. Not a drive-by or drug dealing kind of gang, but a small group of criminals. There were 4 of us in total. Myself, my 2 childhood friends, L and R, and an older individual who I'll call K. Our game was home invasion, and we were really good at it. Invading a home is by far one of the most intense experiences a person can have, in my opinion. And even though you may have this mindset that the predator, attacker, or robber is in control of the situation, they're not. They are just as scared and terrified as you are. While I think it is smart to assume and prepare for the worst when your home is being invaded, you need to know that the person inside your home is more than likely just trying to make a quick buck and will run out the door the second they're threatened. We invaded homes to steal, never to hurt. So we tried our best to never invade homes when the occupants were there. Leaving lights on, TVs on, or just making your house look occupied is the best first line of defense against home invasions. If we got to a target house thinking the occupants were out and realized that there was a TV on or that a bedroom light was on, we would immediately leave. When scouting houses, we also looked for dogs. If the house had a dog or even a remote sign of a dog, we would immediately scratch it off the list. If the house had a bright "We have an alarm" sticker, we would also cross it off the list. We would also never go anywhere near a house if it was obvious that the neighbours or neighbourhood community was closely knit, especially if a cop lived in the neighbourhood. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is if you don't announce you're vulnerable, you will probably not get robbed. Like I said, we always tried to avoid houses if there were people home, but sometimes we would slip up. So here is my scary story from the bad guy's point of view. It was a windy and cold October night, and we were driving to our target house and listening to some music along the way. The house we had planned to invade was a corner house that was adjacent to a large retirement home with a lot of trees and a large parking lot. We would park our vehicle at the retirement home and quickly scuttle across the street to the house, which had an in-ground pool in the backyard, was also fenced off and completely hidden to anyone outside the pool. The family was away for fall holiday, according to Kay. Kay used to pay high school delinquents for tips on when families would be leaving for vacation. Considering how much teenagers like to blab about their vacations to one another, and the fact that Facebook was getting popular at the time, everyone was more than willing to announce when they would be across the country. So, like we had done many times before, we parked and had a moment of silence, and then held hands to mentally prepare and get in sync, as Kay would always call it. We put on our balaclavas and scurried across the street, used a stepladder to hurdle the fence, unlocked the fence gate from the inside for our escape, and then proceeded to the French doors that led to the basement of the house. Elle was experienced with lockpicking tools, and a relative of his was ironically a locksmith before he passed away, so Elle was more than capable of undoing a knob lock. The reason we go to the patio is because patio doors, French doors, and similar doors that lead into the house don't have a deadbolt. Doors with deadbolts literally can't be opened without force, so get some deadbolts on your doors. We entered the house quietly and began to rummage through the basement for electronics and other goods. The reason we still wear masks, even though we know that there is no one home, is because there is a small chance that someone uses a webcam that constantly records, or an unknown variable somehow takes a picture of us. We rummaged for about 28 minutes before we all simultaneously shit our pants. Out of the raw silence of night and hearing nothing but small creaks and light rummaging comes a loud smartphone ring. The default iPhone ring still gives me chills due to how traumatizing it was when we were inside the house. K and L had gone upstairs when the ring went off, so the only people near the escape door was me and R. Considering how close we all were, we didn't want to just abandon K and L, but we mutually gave each other that look and proceeded to go hide by the pool gate and wait for K and L so we could quit while we were ahead. I made it to the doors, but I was still in the middle of the damn basement when a door to a room we had not opened yet flung open. I darted back behind the couch and R ran outside before the lights flipped on, and a young female came walking out of the room wearing nothing but underwear and texting on her phone. I could barely see her from behind the couch, but I kept a close eye on her to see where she was looking and where she was going. She could have easily seen me in her peripherals, considering that black only blends in if the lights are off. She walked into the basement bathroom and proceeded to use the restroom. I took this opportunity to try and make my escape, but I had gotten behind the couch so quickly that I actually got myself awkwardly stuck on my side, rendering my left arm useless. I had to push the couch away from the wall, which made a decent amount of noise, but I doubt she heard it over her using the bathroom. I kind of figured she would wash her hands or something, but right when I stood up is when she came out of the bathroom. If you want to know what terror looks like, you should have seen her face. And if you want to know what terror looks like under a balaclava, you should have seen mine. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, and all I could do was feel my heart sink into my stomach as hundreds of scenarios rushed through my head. There is no doubt in my mind that her head was doing the same thing. I could almost see her face rapidly flushing, and I'm pretty sure she started to sweat. She then broke my trance with a blood-curdling squeal that almost knocked me back into the wall. Her squeal only lasted around a second because Kay came downstairs like a fucking MMA fighter and put her in a mouth-covering headlock. I don't know much about Kay, but I know Kay had some sort of military history, so I wasn't too surprised in retrospect that he knew how to grapple someone like that so quickly. Kay then kicked the phone to me and demanded that I see the recent calls and texts. At that point though, I was terrified. Even though I was on the badass side, I could hardly move. The horror on her face was just too much for me, and I had never had a job go this bad this fast before. Kay looked at me again, and I could see fear in his eyes too, and he told me to check the damn phone. As I picked up the phone, Kay began a rather scary interrogation.
Is there anyone else in the house?
Kay said to the girl. She shook her head no furiously and began breathing faster. Kay then looked upstairs at Elle and gave him a nod. Kay looked back at me and asked me about the phone. I just shook my head because it was locked and I still wasn't exactly thinking straight due to the adrenaline. Kay then said,
Quick, throw it in the pool.
The girl made a plea from behind Kay's hand, but I still tossed it into the pool. R had already gone back to the vehicle with the junk she found and had it ready to go for us when we got out. When I came back inside, I locked eyes with the girl again, and she gave me a look of hatred and fear I still can't get over. I looked at Kay, and he saw right through me.
Go back to the vehicle.
I ran back to the vehicle and got in next to R, breathing heavily and kinda losing my shit. We waited silently for around 20 minutes when Kay and Elle got into the vehicle with their shit and we booked it. I was too afraid to ask at the time, and I was beyond paranoid that flashing lights were about to flag us down any minute, so I simply didn't. According to Elle, when I asked him about a week later what happened, Kay had him go unplug all the phones he could find, and then he and Kay duct taped the girl just enough to buy them time to leave without her calling for help. It has been 4 years since that, and I have moved several times since then. That was my last job, and I now attend uni on the other side of the continent. I don't keep in touch with Kay anymore, but I do talk to Eleanor every now and then. They all stopped after 1 or 2 more jobs, and we all got our shit together. I'm not sure where Kay is. Probably in prison, considering Kay's other hobbies outside of the invasion gig. G'day mates, it's be.busta here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you're all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. And also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week. You can also catch me on my second channel, all of which have links in the description below. Thanks again for always tuning in guys, for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.